everyone, welcome back to another edition of the SBK Betting Podcast, where we've got to the middle of July and we have a midsummer treat in the shape of the July meeting at Newmarket. And by the time you're listening to this podcast, it's probably already started at Newmarket on the Thursday. Rattles all the way through into the Saturday, but unfortunately the weather's not really played kind to us. We've got a bit of a not a feeling of summer in the air, and it's actually interesting because they've watered a good bit, so it will be curious to see if this rain that's forecast will come down and might change things as we look ahead to the July Cup, which will be our feature. But just a quick word on last week. It was, of course, the Eclipse, which was just a fascinating race in terms of the tactics, and we were delivered a real treat. I was really pleased to see Paddington, who I put up at me even money, went off at odds on. He was really strong in the market before he won, beating Emily Upjohn in a real battle. My Napsy Silk Road, somehow she got beat at Haydock, but she did run a blinder to finish second. Ross, your next best classic, delivered at 6-1, bit hairy before the off. He was getting reshod, and it was all getting a bit delayed, and the 6-1 was looking okay, quite generous. That looks nice. And then he really delivered in the sort of dying strides. It was a great finish that race. And your Nap Je ne sais quoi was a close second at 9-2. Quick thoughts on Classic, but also quick thoughts on that Eclipse, Ross.
Well, first of all, thoughts on Classic. I mean, he finally is getting back to something like he showed as a 2-year-old. I mean, he was only just beaten by the Foxes as a 2-year-old. You know, the ability is undoubtedly there. He doesn't look all that easy. He was still far too keen. If they find a way of harnessing that exuberance, he's definitely got the style of racing that's going to stay further. I just think he can't at the moment because he's too keen. So certainly one I'll be trying to keep on side. And then with the Eclipse, I just think the best horse won. Okay, he was getting lumps of weight, but I think she'd have been there in a month of Sundays and she would never have got past his shoulder. He was always just pulling out a little bit more. Still looks quite raw. I don't think the race went exactly as Ryan Moore would have designed it to go. I think he was in front plenty soon enough. I said after his win at Royal Ascot that he was impressive, and if he was better over 10 furlongs, he wanted to keep on side. I'm slightly kicking myself. I went against him. I did. Those are the medicines you have to take. I think he's a really smart colt. He's definitely the standout 3-year-old to my eye. And I must make a really big note in my notepad now to not oppose Paddington next time.
Yeah, especially coming back in trip. It was really interesting listening to Aidan O'Brien, who stood around for interviews for ages saying that this horse got more speed than the Lights Giants Causeway going back to a mile. They're no problem with at all. I think he's going to be a really fun horse to follow, and you feel like a lot more confident about his ability, especially now he's proven himself against the Elders compared to the likes of Auguste Rodin, who still needs to do that, beat the Elders, which we'll see in the King George, we hope, in a few weeks' time. While I have the opportunity, I just wanted to thank all those who got in touch with me after we sadly lost Maxid in the Old Newton Cup last week. I obviously put him up as my next best, and I was really, really keen on his chances, but it was truly devastating, and it's going to take a long, long time to fully come to terms with it. But I just wanted to say, really appreciate all the lovely messages that have come through for such a talented and really special horse to all of us at Thurlow. So thank you to everyone for that. But we'll move on. We'll move on to this weekend. The July Festival, as I said, which culminates with the Group 1 July Cup, the penultimate race of the entire meeting on Saturday. And fans of this race and Little Big Bear fans were probably clinging to the edge of their seats to see whether that horse would be declared for the rematch against Shaquille, the rematch obviously being from the Commonwealth Cup at Royal Ascot. And even though I think there was some slight issue with Little Big Bear at the beginning of the week, they clearly have resolved it, and he has been declared. And Ryan Moore rides, which means Shaquille, and the most unusual, amazing circumstance, was a free spare ride for one lucky man or woman, with last time out jockey Oisin Murphy serving as band, James Dawes at Ascot, and Ross O'Brien has come in looking for his first Group 1. Tom, I'll come to you first, because first of all, 2 3-year-olds that really stand out in their own division, their own age, now up against the Elders. But it would have been a real shame if Little Big Bear didn't hold his ground with just the 9 confirmed. It's always been how good are the 3-year-old sprinters against the Elders. But for me, and I'd love to get your thoughts, they they set a very big benchmark, and I don't really think we've got a standout sprinter from the older generation.
No, I completely agree. 3-year-olds have won 4 of the last 8 editions anyway. I think they hold the key to this year's renewal. I'll come back to the older horses at the end of this spiel, but I think the 2 3-year-olds will have it between them. I want either Shaquille or Little Big Bet on my side. And given the latter's a bigger price, albeit he was 7-1 pre-declarations, because obviously some traders didn't think he would be declared, he'll definitely do for me. It's worth noting that Aidan O'Brien actually won this race with 10 sovereigns back in 2019, and he was a very similar type to Little Big Bear, except for the fact that Little Big Bear has actually achieved more at this stage of his career than 10 Sovereigns has. 10 Sovereigns, interestingly, also lost in the Commonwealth Cup at a short price prior to coming to the July Cup and winning. Little Big Bear obviously stuffed last time out by Shaquille. There was no excuse for Little Big Bear on paper that day. He got a good break. He was in the best part of the track. And Shaquille actually can be marked up given he completely missed the start. However, you have to forgive horses for slightly below par performances. We say this time and time again on this podcast. Ever since last year, I think with Altior, I think he was the main horse, or it could have been another Hendo horse, I can't remember. But you have to, yeah. Shishkin, that's it. We have to forgive horses for a below par performance every now and again. And if that was Little Big Bear's bad race, he's finished second in a Group 1. So, it was still a good effort. It just wasn't at the same caliber we saw on his previous start or in his 2-year-old career when he won the Phoenix Stakes. He's a bigger price than Shaquille. I think they're quite evenly matched on that basis. And given the fact the July course is definitely going to suit this big, scopy, long striding type, I think Little Big Bear has to be the bet. Talking about the older horses, Azure Blue's the highest up in the betting of the older generation. She's taken huge strides up the grade ladder this year. I think this could be one step too many for her, though she is very consistent. Kim Ross is definitely a 7-furlong horse. He's just trying his hand over different trips. I know he's won over 6 before, but this is not his distance, and he's facing 2 very good 3-year-olds over 6 furlongs. And I'm just unconvinced that Cardem's going to back up his Royal Ascot victory. And then you've got the 4 outsiders, all of whom have performed badly on their most recent outings, so I couldn't have them. So I think it's between the 3-year-olds. Little Big Bear's a bigger price. I'm having him.
Okay, Little Big Bear to do is exactly essentially what 10 Sovereigns did and reverse the form and really, that was, I remember it being advertised versus 10 Sovereigns in the same way, and advertised was down and Sword was second. But I just checking there, seeing the race analysis that 10 Sovereigns, they've been very bullish about him in the sort of days leading up, and they thought that, they really got him back to a better place. But that hasn't been the same for Little Big Bear. He's not coming into this with the perfect prep in, which you do have to be slightly concerned about, Ross. Like, what exactly has been the problem, and how much of a worry might that be for Little Big Bear fans?
Well, I think I'm right in saying that it was a stone bruise, Jess, which just means that he's not been able to work. He's got a sore foot, so you just have to mind it. It's not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but the amazing number of times that stone bruises come up at the most inopportune time. There's the sales on at the moment. The number of horses that are withdrawn because they stand on a stone going out of the stable to go on the box to go to the sales is just uncanny, really. And it does just add a question mark, because if he's missed work, that's not ideal. But I think they know where they're at with this horse, in that it'll very quickly, this is a stallion in the making. Very quickly, people will start to ask questions if he goes too long without delivering. Very quickly, his 2-year-old career gets forgotten, and he simply just isn't as a valuable commodity as a stallion. So I don't think they'll be taking any chances on fitness here whatsoever, which leads me to agree with TC in that the price disparity between himself and Shaquille is for me just too big, because I am absolutely convinced that for whatever reason, he just did not give his running at Ascot. Now, at some point, you have to draw a line and put the 2-year-old form in a box, but I still am just not quite prepared to get away from that Vincent O'Brien Stakes win at the Curragh, where he absolutely blew the opposition out of the water. He was nowhere near like that at Ascot. He took a fair bit of work to get past Swing Along. He was rated 105 going into the Commonwealth Cup, and then possibly was a bit softened up by that to be unable to repel Shaquille. But given that I'm convinced Little Big Bear will stay 7 furlongs, he wasn't all that strong through the line at Ascot. Like, it just didn't look like him at all. So I'm prepared to agree with TC and just say that wasn't his run. I give him another chance. I'm not sure how many times I'm going to say give him another chance, but I just can't quite shake that he just isn't head and shoulders above these guys. Shaquille just concerns me. He's got to get down to the start. He's not easy. Ross Orion is a really good jockey booking, but you can't say it's a positive that there's this continual change of pilots. Continuity is valuable in these top class races where every little pound and ounce of benefit you can get is worth having. And he's drawn on the wing, like he could. It almost suited him to miss the break at Ascot because it meant he dropped the bridle and raced in behind the pack. If he ironically gets a good start here, he can be posted on the wing and he could over race. So there's enough question marks for me against him. Conversely, like I said, Little Big Bear, at some point you've got to leave his 2-year-old form alone. At some point you have got to start taking Shaquille very seriously, and I'm just not quite there yet. I completely agree with that, TC on Azure Blue. I think she's been really progressive, but she beat Highfield Princess half a length when Highfield Princess was on her first run, and Azure Blue had race fitness on her side. I just wouldn't be quite as quick to dismiss Kinross if the rain comes. I know he's dropping back in trip, but this is a stiff 6. If the rain comes and he gets a bit of soft ground, he's one of these that's going to guarantee to like that ground. So keep an eye on that. And I completely agree with TC with Cardam. I mean, he must be long odds to even back up anywhere near his run. I mean, it was his win at Royal Ascot was really impressive, but it was his first win for a year, and he'd not really hinted at anything like that before. So sprinters are, they do say if you run it 10 times, you get 10 different results, but he wouldn't be one that I'd be convinced would back up his Royal Ascot form.
Yeah, and talking about jockeys, I think after the win at Royal Ascot, they said Jamie Spencer is the real key to Cardam, and not having Jamie Spencer on him. And I don't know if Rob Hornby's ever ridden him before. And again, we know Rob Hornby's won this race last year, Group 1 jockey, but I think if anything, Cardam or Shaquille, it's Cardam that you would be more worried about jockey-wise. I've got to completely disagree with both of you. I think you're both absolutely bonkers. And I don't know when you're going to start believing that Shaquille is a proper horse. I talked about him before at Royal Ascot, that this horse has been, and I remember James Jaw saying that if he was able to ride the horse, he would be his best chance at Royal Ascot. And he was right, but poor thing wasn't even riding the horse. He gave me a lot of confidence the way that he talked about him, and he sat on some seriously good horses and quick horses as well. And he did something that I could not believe at Royal Ascot, coming from where he did, completely missing the break. He must have traded pretty big in the running, big enough anyway for a race of that nature, and he went past and he won easily. He won going away in the end, and I think Little Big Bear ran his race. So I completely disagree with both of you. I think he had every opportunity. Aidan O'Brien had all his horses absolutely spot on at Royal Ascot. Ryan Moore was riding to the best of his ability, and Shaquille just could not keep up the momentum when Shaquille came to him and then went away from him. So it wasn't the ideal circumstances. He broke badly, but up until that point he behaved really well, and this is a horse that in the preliminaries would have been a worry to me. I stood there, I watched him, and they handled him very well, and massive credit to the Julie Camacho team for the way that they have been able to nurture this horse and bring out the best in him. I think, considering, and we touched on this just before we came on, that he doesn't get a Group 1, neither of them get a Group 1 penalty. Neither of them, Shaquille and Little Big Bear, meet on exactly the same terms. One was a Group 1 winner from 2, one's a Group 1 winner at 3, both on 9-2, both receive weight from their elders. Shaquille really should be giving Little Big Bear weight at this stage after that performance, and yet he comes in here with, I think, everything in his favour. Ross Orion has been riding out of his skin. The Railway Stakes victory when aboard Porta Fortuna in the Curragh, where he beat Ryan Moore, was really like proper race riding and great to rewatch again. So he'll be happy to face off Ryan Moore, and he deserves a Group 1 victory the way that he's been riding this season. I'm all in on Shaquille. He's 2-1. I think it'll be difficult to know. TC, what are your thoughts on prices where we'll get to come Saturday? This is keeping in mind that maybe the ground doesn't get too much on a sort of worse than good side, and that there's a steady enough, there's no reason to disbelieve that either of these horses can't be running, as they would do today, say. How do you think the prices might change?
I think Little Big Bear might be vying for favouritism. I have to say, I think it'll be 9-4 and 2-1 each of two. Right now, there's a whole array of prices because I don't think some firms have updated since the declaration. So if you're looking on Racing Post, for example, you can see 6-1 for Little Big Bear, but that's I don't think that's even available. There are 3-1. There is 3-1 on offer. We don't have a price at SBK right now, so you'll have to tune back into the market nearer the time. But the fact that I just want to jump in on what you said about Shaquille. Two things quickly. One, Little Big Bear went off, I think, 10-11 at Ascot. Shaquille went off at 9-1. If they go off 2-1 each of two, there's a 50% swing in the market, just if this was a match race between the two. I don't think Shaquille's performance warrants such a massive swing. I think Little Big Bear should be favourite still, personally, on prior efforts. And also with Shaquille. Now, I'm not saying he cannot win the race for sure. He's definitely one of the leading players alongside Little Big Bear. But he's so headstrong in the early part of the race. I think actually missing the start that day helped him. He got cover. He was a bit keen for a few strides, but not as many strides as on his previous effort. I think it was at the Newbury. If he breaks on terms this time, he could be really headstrong early on, and that could lose him the race against a horse like Little Big Bear. So it'd be interesting to see if they take a real patient approach. Even if he breaks on terms, hold him right up out the back, and then hope to come through with that late run. But if they go forward like they did in his prior effort, I think he's going to be vulnerable.
Okay, well, I think, look, you'd imagine a like of Art Power will probably break pretty strongly, and does the only way that Art Power does, and makes it a pretty big test out right down the middle of the straight. And maybe Ross Orion will see from that it wouldn't help him just to miss the kick a little bit, but not completely miss it like he did. I don't know. I just think you're completely wrong. I think it's just a Julie Camacho thing. He should have been half the price at Royal Ascot. He was 9-1 because Julie Camacho's never had a Royal Ascot winner, never had a Group 1 winner, and it's Aidan O'Brien. I think it's just that classic could have been if it's trained by anyone else type of thing, and I fully believe in this horse. So let's see who gets egg on their face come Saturday.
Yes, says that Shaquille is a slam dunk.
Basketball puns.
Let's see. I'm happy to be proved wrong, but I'd be even happier to prove you two wrong. So let's see how it pans out. Just the 9 runners for the July Cup. But a very good match up like we had last week indeed. Okay, it's a very busy weekend racing all over the country. You've got the John Smith's Cup, you've got racing at Ascot, the Summer Mile, you've got racing around the bends at Chester. That's where Holly Doyle's going to be. She's been in super form this week. There's lots to get our teeth into. Ross, because you had a pretty good weekend last weekend, you can take it from here.
And because I didn't answer back when you dressed us down.
You're scared of me. It's brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. I know where I'm at. Last week was quite slim picking, so I was glad to find one. Actually, this week there was a few to pick from. I think it's quite a good weekend of racing. But the two I've come down on, the Nap is in the 420 at York. Another nursery, having gone painfully close last week. I'm gonna go again, and it's Callianassa for Brian Ellison. She made a nice debut at Newcastle on the all-weather. She raced away up the middle of the track, a little bit in isolation. Everything sort of developed up the far side rail. She was bang there with a furlong to run, and then slightly weakened, and perhaps just got a bit lost racing on her own. But it was a nice debut. She then followed that up with a 6 in the Hilary Needler at Beverley, where she was a bit outpaced in the early stages. They went very quick early, and she just struggled to hang on to them. But she did so, and then was building up a real head of steam. And Rowan Scott went for a gap up the rail. He sort of dived up the rail, and the gap closed on him pretty abruptly, and he had to snatch her up. She was eventually beaten about 4 lengths back in 6th, but would undoubtedly have been closer. She wasn't going to win it, but she'd have been much, much closer. And I really liked how she was rallying over the stiff 5 there. She then went to the Queen Mary, where she was just completely outclassed, frankly, and never really stood a chance. But she's got a marker 76, and it's the Hilary Needler run that really interests me. Ziggy's Phoenix, who was 2.5 lengths ahead of her, is on a mark of 82. As is Tula Bell. She was in 3rd. She's on 82. And the second placed Flora of Bermuda is 91. This marker 76 underestimates her. She'd have been bang in and around those, if not in front of a couple of them with a clear run. Step up to 6 furlongs is going to suit her. I think it's a smart bit of training really to sort of effectively get her handicapped off just her second run. Marker 76 is below what she's going to be, and with a bit of luck, I think she'll win the 420. And then for the next best, I'm going into normally uncharted waters, really, particularly on this podcast. It's the 505 at Salisbury, the Apprentice Handicap, and it's actually a horse I know really well. I started him off in his career. A horse called Q20 Boy, who's been a really good servant to the Usher team. He's ideally suited by these apprentice races and ideally suited by stiff tracks because he finishes very, very strongly. He's absolutely tenacious. He's dropped down the handicap. He was second over this course pretty much a year ago of 63. He's now down to 52. That was over 5 furlongs. He's staying on that day. He's been sort of muddling around 4th and 5th and 6th. He was 4th last time under this jockey who claims 7. Just never, ever got a run. The door just kept closing. Katrine Holm, I don't think she did an awful lot wrong. And what I quite liked was that she stayed composed when she must have been feeling so frustrated at being sat on stacks of horse with nowhere to go. She'll know him now from that run. I think he does take a bit of knowing. He does require a certain way of riding. He'll require some gaps. But I think Salisbury, 6 furlongs, an apprentice race where they'll go fast early because they will perhaps ride to instruction a bit. You can often get 5 or 6 that are told to be handy, and then they'll all try and be forward, and they end up pushing an overly strong pace. She'll know that she needs to sit off that pace. If the pace collapses, he'll be finishing strongest. And my old mate, Q20 Boy, is the next best.
Okay, good luck to Katrine Holm, looking for her first win. It looks to me on her 5th ride. So Q20 Boy and Callan Asset for Ross. Okay. TC, I know that we're matching on our nap, so I'll let you go for it because we probably could both wax lyrical a little bit about this horse based on what we saw first time out. So what is it?
Yeah, we were completely contrasting with our July Cup views, but we're in harmony here with the 325 at Newmarket, a horse called City of Troy. Now, Charlie Appleby has actually had Aidan O'Brien's number in the Superlative Stakes over the last decade, really, with 4 wins compared to Aidan O'Brien's 1. However, I think the tide is ready to turn this year, as I loved City of Troy's debut. He has a superb pedigree as well. He's by Triple Crown winner Justify out of 2014 Phillies Mile winner Together Forever. Just a fantastic pedigree, which suggests he's going to excel over middle distances around a mile 4, 1 mile 2. He's also a full brother to this year's London Gold Cup winner and King George V Stakes third Bertinelli, again over 1 mile 2 and 1 mile 4. So his future lies over much further trips. However, on debut, he showed an abundance of speed, and the way he hit the line was superb. He was just hitting his 5th gear. He didn't even go into 6th gear, and I really think this horse has a huge ceiling. He ran to an RPR of 96 that day. You generally need to hit around 110 to win the Superlative. I think that's well within his compass, and I think City of Troy will win the 325 at Newmarket. And the next best, I'm going to give you 2 next bests, both in the same race. Slightly rogue next best this week with Q20 Boy and Apprentice Handicap, and 2 in 1 race from me. But it's the 235 at York, and the horses are Kurdos and Great State, 2 horses that I've put up before on this podcast. They're 10 to 1 and 8 to 1 respectively. So, you could do far worse than split your stakes and back both. They're 2 3-year-olds. Kurdos featured in my Royal Ascot eye catcher piece because just the way he hit the front in the Palace of Holyrood House. He raced down the middle in that event, and all the horses generally came towards stand side, so it probably wasn't the place to be. Yet when the camera panned, as Kurdos was making his move, he was going 2 to everything else as 1, really quick and nicely, and unfortunately only just got done in the dying strides because he hung about 7 lengths across the track to try and join his foe. The fact that he was even able to compete from that draw, I think, suggests he's well capable of winning this race. And the other one is Great State, who bolted up over this course and distance on his penultimate outing. Ross and I were all over him. I don't know if you were, Jess, as well, last time out at Sandown. When it was a short price, he travelled into the race pretty poorly. He was ridden along in the early stages. Then he got to the right next to the leaders, and the jockey eased up slightly. Then the 2 protagonists went forward, and Great State couldn't peg them back. I think the more galloping nature of York going back to this venue will definitely suit him. And at 8 to 1, I definitely want a bit on Great State as well. If you were to push me, Kurdos will be the stronger of the 2. But as I say, I'll be splitting my stakes.
Yeah, that was gut-wrenching. I remember seeing Ross Ryan coming back in on Kurdos when he just got beaten by Rhythm and Hooves, and had a really good run that day, Kurdos. So yeah, that's a good City of Wolves, isn't it? I think sometimes York can get a little bit lost in the crowd on Saturday, but it's a really, really good card indeed. And yeah, I've got to echo what TC has said about City of Troy. He's my nap as well. He's a horse that at the moment, just looking at anti-post markets, he's already 14-1 second favourite for the 2,000 guineas, and he's 16-1 for the Derby. He's a horse.
That's what I want. 16s for the Derby, Jess.
Yeah. Do you remember the last time we agreed about the Derby at this kind of stage?
Was it Desert Crown? I think it might have been.
Yeah, it was after he won. It was later in the year at Nottingham. But yeah, sometimes it's worth following when we picked out a 2-year-old and try and do what Ross does so well. But I was lucky enough to be at the Curragh that day when he won, and I can't underestimate how tough that headwind was. It was so strong. Horses really had to battle their way through it. That was one of the reasons that they gave of Auguste Rodin's disappointing effort. I think it was probably slightly worse on the Sunday than it was on the Saturday, but you still had to have quite a good mindset and constitution to be able to go through it. And I think I was really impressed with him to battle against the elements in his first time out. Beautiful looking horse. As TC said, it's got the pedigree, and I'm looking forward to seeing take what looks to be an obvious next step. So City of Troy, my nap. And then my next best, there's so many I could have given, but I love the John Smith's Cup. It's a race that I follow greatly, and I'm always intrigued to see what trainers, some of the bigger trainers, throw horses in, thinking that they might have something that's sort of on a good mark for a race like this. They always go hard. Last year it was a really good renewal. Anmar won it. And he actually beat a horse of ours, Achilles, who she was 25-1 that day, and of Andrew Balding. Now, Andrew has got a really good record in the race. He won it a couple of years ago with Johnny Drama. He also won it with Puvine back in 2019. He's got an interesting selection of horses. I like Nobel. Kieran Fallon's on board, got a £5 penalty, and still has quite a nice racing weight of 8 stone 9. He is a horse I know they thought a lot of back in his 2-year-old days. He got an injury which saw him out for most of his 3-year-old season, came back with a big win. He's had wind surgery. He's had they sort of dealt with a few problems and niggles that he's had, but he showed to be, definitely well ahead of his handicap mark when bolting up and beating some useful enough benchmarks and some useful enough horses in behind him at Newcastle last time. He made a bit of a mockery of them. This is tougher, but I think they have always held him in really high regard for a yard that's going really well, and in around 10-1, that's not a bad each way bet, I don't think, for a race like this. So Nobel for me in the John Smith's Cup. So that is it for our racing this weekend. Hopefully we found something interesting. Hopefully you're either with me and taking the wise route with Shaquille, or you're with the two nutters on the podcast. But we'll see how that pans out this time next week. Don't forget, all new SBK users get £30 in free bets when they sign up and bet £10 for the first time. Make sure to subscribe, whatever podcast channel you listen to us on, or you can watch us on YouTube. There's plenty of more content appearing on our YouTube channel as well. So make sure you enjoy that, and we'll see you next week.